everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today is Thursday and it's a rainy day here in South Louisiana, but either way, wake up and be a part of the world. But hi, my name is Daniel. I'm your host. I got in a wheelchair.
Guy in the chair.
He said it.
And today we're going to be watching Critical Drinker's take on Resident Evil Netflix series that just came out. So enjoy.
It's awful.
Damn, man, it's almost impressive at this point just how terrible the Resident Evil screen adaptations are capable of being. Like, every time I think they've hit creative bedrock, they somehow find a way to keep digging and reach even greater depths of shittiness. I mean, the Mila Jovovich movies were basically a gradual descent into insanity in their own right. It's like the filmmakers themselves couldn't quite believe that their movies were popular enough to justify sequels, to the point that each one basically ended up undoing the events of its predecessor so that it could go off in a completely different direction. And by the end, the cast and crew had fully transitioned into no fucks given territory. But holy shit, they were absolute masterpieces compared to Welcome to Raccoon City, a disastrous attempt to reboot the franchise by meshing together the plots of the first two games into a ridiculous mess of a story that nobody wanted. The script was idiotic, the acting was more wooden than an old-timey sailing ship, the action scenes made Book of Boba Fett look like Terminator 2, and the whole thing felt like it was done on a budget of about $500. In short, it was a garbage movie with a garbage script and a garbage production, and honestly, it seemed like Resident Evil had finally hit rock bottom. But there was worse to come, dear viewer. A lot worse.
Whoa! What is it? What? Oh no!
When a Resident Evil TV series was announced on Netflix, enthusiasm wasn't exactly at fever pitch. After all, Resident Evil fans had been burned more times than Star Wars and Star Trek fans combined. But apathy soon turned to confusion when the first promo pictures and casting announcements came out, and we were treated to the baffling sight of Lance Reddick as Albert Wesker, not to mention a primary cast composed almost entirely of women. Was this really going to be another ridiculous race-swapped intersectional feminist disaster drenched in heavy doses of the message? Or was it all just a big misunderstanding and Resident Evil was destined to be the best video game adaptation of all time?
Chris? Stop it.
No, Resident Evil is terrible. Not terrible as in it's a guilty pleasure like the Mila Jovovich movies. Not terrible in a clumsy, low-budget, well, they tried their best kind of way like Welcome to Raccoon City. No, this show is so bad that I genuinely don't even understand the thought process behind it. It's like Dawn of the Dead if Dawn of the Dead was made by the CW, a show that swings wildly between angsty teenage melodrama and post-apocalyptic survival story with absolutely no rhyme or reason. I'm going to do my best to summarize this absolute nonsense, but don't expect any kind of detailed plot breakdown, because to be honest with you, the less I have to talk about this shit, the better. Anyway, the narrative of Resident Evil takes place in two different time periods, split between the events leading up to a zombie outbreak in the present day, and the struggle to stay alive in a post-apocalyptic world 14 years later. If I had to pick the one strand that's marginally less shit than the other, I'd say the post-apocalyptic future segments probably win out, on the basis that at least some things actually happen in them. This is a world that's been devastated by a T-virus pandemic, reducing the world's population to a few hundred million holed up in fortified cities run by Umbrella, which seems to have become the de facto world government now. But there's still a few people working to make things better, including Jade, a strong, empowered female character who spends her days studying the zombies in the hopes of finding a cure someday. But along the way, she runs into Umbrella strike teams, hostile survivors, mutated animals, and estranged family members now working for the enemy. It's a bit like playing Chris's campaign on Resident Evil 6, if Chris's campaign had been directed by Tommy Wiseau. But then every so often the narrative will jump back to the present day, focusing on teenage Jade, along with her sister Billy and their father Albert Wesker. Because apparently this is what Albert Wesker looks like now.
Wesker, you're pitiful.
And also, this is what twin sisters apparently look like. The world doesn't make any sense to me anymore. Anyway, the Whiskers have just moved into New Raccoon City, a creepily neat corporate town in the middle of nowhere, run by everyone's favourite purveyors of insanely impractical viral weaponry. The girls are pretty different in terms of their personalities. Jade's outgoing and sociable and makes friends easily, while Billy's shy and awkward, and vegan, because of course she's fucking vegan. It's almost like they set out to make a character as unlikable and preachy as possible. Anyway, when she spots some animals being shipped into Umbrella headquarters, she begins to suspect that the company is up to no goods. Really? You think? So she does the sensible thing and sneaks back in there with Jade one night, because apparently two teenage girls can easily sneak into the high security headquarters of a major pharmaceutical company with no problems whatsoever. But oh no, they accidentally release a zombie dog and Billy gets bitten, and then Albert shows up to save the day and sends the girls home so that he can cover the whole thing up. Because I guess security men, night watchmen, and any kind of live video feeds are just not a thing in this world. So anyway, the main focus of the present day stuff is the tension over whether or not Billy is going to turn into a zombie, the girls' growing suspicion that their dad isn't everything he seems to be, and their efforts to gradually uncover what exactly Umbrella is hiding. And this is where Resident Evil mutates from a boring, uninspired zombie show into a living nightmare that genuinely had me wishing for a real-life zombie apocalypse so that it could bring my suffering to an end. I mean, call me crazy, but I'm willing to bet that out of all the things that could possibly appeal to fans of the games, the angst and tedious social hang-ups of two asshole teenage girls have got to be pretty far down that list. Honestly, who the hell was this show even supposed to appeal to? The kind of people who actually find teenage dramas interesting are going to check out the moment the zombies show up, and the people who just want zombies and action and guns are going to be bored out of their minds by all the teenage angsty stuff. Instead of complementing each other to produce a full and complete story, the split narratives end up competing and cancelling each other out. It doesn't exactly help that neither character has anything even resembling likability. Billy is whiny, boring and pathetic for most of the early segments, while Jade is arrogant, patronising and aggressive. So basically like every female character written these days, she consistently manipulates and uses others for her own benefit, expecting them to put themselves in danger without ever considering the repercussions. She takes ridiculous risks and consistently ignores warnings from people more knowledgeable than herself, and she's even an asshole towards her own father, openly disobeying and insulting him. Why exactly is this idiot the protagonist again?
I can't figure it out at all.
Both girls are insanely stupid and irresponsible. Like, at one point Billy's been infected with the T-virus and potentially only has a couple of hours left before turning into a mutated flesh-eating zombie. So instead of going to a hospital or safely isolating her in a secure place in case the worst happens, the two girls instead do the sensible thing and go to a house party with hundreds of innocent people in attendance.
Just when I think you couldn't possibly be any dumber.
Yeah, fucking genius. Their motivations flip on a dime as well. In the first few episodes, Billy is the one who suspects Umbrella of wrongdoing and pushes Jade to help her get to the truth. But then like 2 episodes later, she's perfectly happy to sit back and assume that everything's A-okay, while Jade becomes the one that's pushing for answers. Why? Don't know. Another time, after running into a conspiracy theorist who cast doubt on their parentage, they realise that their dad has never actually told them a single thing about his family, his childhood, or even where he was born. And they just never really thought to ask him about it until this precise moment. What the fuck? You're seriously telling me that you've never once asked your dad a single question about his life before you were born? I mean, if you've lived with someone for years or even decades without really knowing a thing about them, that should be a very obvious red flag that they're probably hiding things from you. Oh, and in case you didn't pick it up from the trailers, Resident Evil takes place in a magical fantasy world where about 90% of all military, scientific, executive leadership and general positions of authority are held by women, because that's totally how things work in the real world. The male characters generally fall into one of 2 camps, either comically stupid and ineffective morons whose only real job is to get killed, or passive, effeminate beta males that are perfectly happy to be treated like shit, never stand up for themselves, and generally act like they're sorry for even existing. Honest to God, when is this Hollywood trend of open disdain and hatred for men and masculinity going to do the world a favour and just fucking die. The cast is made up mostly of talentless nobodies who sleepwalk their way through their scenes, rattling off their atrocious dialogue with all the enthusiasm and commitment of a fat positivity activist at a CrossFit tournament. Watching Evelyn Marcus interacting with her wife is almost physically painful. It adds absolutely nothing to the story and seems to exist for no other reason than so the writers can make it very clear that she's married to a woman. Wow, groundbreaking stuff in 2022. The only person here with actual talent and ability is Lance Reddick, and goddamn, I feel so sorry for this dude. He might have been horribly miscast as Albert Wesker, but I hope he at least got a decent paycheck because he's way better than this show deserves. They've even got him dressed up like fucking Blade. Also, I'm genuinely still trying to make up my mind which is worse. The fact that the show basically ignores everything to do with the Resident Evil video games, their characters and events, or the half-arsed dumb as fuck attempts it makes to reference them. Remember the Moonlight Sonata? Remember Lisa Trevor? Remember Lickers? Remember the Tyrant? Like in episode 5, when Dumb and Dumber have to decipher a torturous series of clues left by their father so that they can access a bug-out bag with money, passports and weapons inside. Like, how the fuck is this supposed to be helpful? The whole point of this ridiculous plan is to warn the girls of impending danger so that they can leave with vital supplies at a moment's notice. Solving riddles and methodically overcoming complex problems is just fine when you're poking around some creaky old mansion with all the time in the world, but not in a fast-paced, high-pressure situation like this. It's a perfect example of the complete lack of thought, logic or common sense that permeates every single inch of this absolute turd. Nothing in this show makes sense. Every character acts, talks and makes decisions with all the savvy and intellect of a 10-year-old with learning difficulties. The pacing is utterly nonsensical. The dialogue sounds like it was written by someone that's never heard actual humans conversing with each other, and it's all crowbarred in with half-assed callbacks and references to the games that I'm willing to bet nobody involved in this shit show actually bothered to play. It's the absolute arrogance of writers and showrunners who wanted to tell their story, push their messages, work with their characters, because what they want is so much more important than what the paying customer wants. Why bother to do a faithful adaptation of the games when you can just tell a completely different story, slap the Resident Evil name on it and call it a day? Honestly though, if I'm in the business of pointing fingers, then I'm gonna blame Capcom for this shit show. After all, they're the ones that had to sign off on this, and they did. I mean seriously, have you guys never even heard of quality control? Do you not realize that every embarrassing failure like this does nothing more than degrade the Resident Evil brands? I mean, how could you have read this script and thought, yeah, this'll turn out great, can't see why our fans wouldn't enjoy this one? Resident Evil on Netflix is without doubt the worst possible Resident Evil experience that I've ever had. Even the Mila Jovovich movies at their worst had some element of campy fun that you could appreciate. Even Welcome to Raccoon City had vaguely recognizable characters and locations, but this was nothing but 8 hours of absolute, abject misery. It's something that I never want to see, talk about, or think about ever again, and it's pretty much the final nail in the coffin of the idea that we'll ever get a decent Resident Evil screen adaptation. Hope you're proud of yourselves, you absolute dicks. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now.
Hey guys, I hope y'all enjoyed watching that of the Critical Drinker, his take on Resident Evil. I don't think they're ever gonna get it right. But hey, give me one of them if you guys earned it. Comment down below if you want to see something else I haven't done yet. Then finally subscribe. And I'll see you in tomorrow's video. Bye-bye.